Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. College football season is in full swing, and the last of the major pro sports leagues are off and rolling. BetOnline remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. College basketball is ready to go. The NFL, college football, and the NHL are all in play right now. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. All the basketball betting action, along with every sport available at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access for every sport anytime. Head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. State of State is presented by BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out the latest Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. And if you're looking for the perfect beer for Penn State football season, we've got you covered with the State IPA. Special thanks to our friends at Funk Brewing for creating the best tailgate and game day beer for Nittany Lion fans. A limited supply of the State IPA is still available now at beer distributors, grocery stores, Funk's tap rooms, plus select bars and restaurants. Visit www.funkbrewing.com/beers/state-IPA to learn where and how you can get State IPA before it runs out for the season. Check out the link in the description of this podcast for more information. Must be 21 years or older to purchase. Please drink responsibly. Plenty of headlines this past weekend in regard to Penn State football. And by the way, there's a game coming up this Saturday. Penn State hosts Rutgers this Saturday at noon Eastern. Rutgers comes into the game, I believe, at 6-4, a little bit of a skid. Meanwhile, Penn State 8-2, just lost to Michigan by a score of 24-15. For those of you that have been living under a rock, and oh, by the way, offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich was fired this past Sunday. For those of you that are tuning into this episode because you want to hear a breakdown of the game, Penn State versus Rutgers, I'm going to speculate that you might be in the minority of Penn State football fans. I'm going to tell you exactly where you can find it. If you scroll ahead in this episode to the point where you hear our good sponsors at HelloFresh get involved, we will do that after that. But until then, we are still going to be talking about all the stuff that happened this past weekend. As much as James Franklin wanted desperately in his press conference on Monday to move past everything that occurred on Saturday and Sunday, it's freaking impossible, Justin. The amount of stuff that happened in a 24-hour span is unbelievable. And the reaction from Penn State football fans, if you tell them, hey, are you going to the game? Senior day, by the way, against Rutgers this Saturday, I guarantee you most of them are going to be like, who cares? And that's such a bummer because I know I'm excited for what the team could do and hopefully they could grow from this, but it's like, it's hard to be optimistic after what went down this past weekend on and off the field.
When you have high expectations coming into the season and go to the national championship or go and make the playoffs for the first time and just keep hitting
Big Ten title game, even if we start there.
Big Ten title game, right? We've been there before. We've won that. So there was a level of expectation coming into the season where we were breaking through the glass ceiling and getting to the playoffs. The way we lost the two games, I think, is what's painful. To where you almost feel like there wasn't, I'm going to say, a strategy put in place from the offensive side of the ball, but just to say that, like, we got to rip up our offensive playbook, get rid of the offensive coordinator, and move forward from this point. So that this disappointment, I think, is mirrored internally when we see the coaching moves, right? Like to get rid of your head coach with 3 games left, or even offensive coordinator. I'm sorry, we get rid of your offensive coordinator with 3 games left in the season that you can possibly finish at 11-2. I think that shows the mentality and disappointment internally as well, where it's like, look, we're not going to rest on our laurels maybe from previous years, where it's like, hey, we're still 11-2. What do you like? We need to have more NIL. We need to have more alignment. It's like, no, it seems like James is responding to realizing that we have to produce it now. And like, this is the talent that we need now. And if this is the problem that we've identified, let's move it along and get the right offensive coordinator in here and move into next year. But it's definitely more of a NFL approach. But I also like the approach from the standpoint of making that decision to be good or great. And when to be great, you have to make those hard decisions or the questionable ones where everyone's not going to be on your side. And for me, when I look at coaches, the ones that are authentic and kind of have their own identity, they have to stand on and make decisions that everyone's not going to like and weather that storm. So let's see how it goes.
Yeah, there's 2 regular season games left and then a bowl game. We'll see how that all shakes out. I want to dive into James Franklin's Monday press conference because, as you well know, Justin, having worked for the man, there's a lot of things in these press conferences where he is very, very careful about what he says. And you have to read between the lines sometimes because he's speaking without speaking at times. So let's start with the firing of offensive coordinator Mike Yurcich. He was asked directly if himself and Pat Kraft, the AD, were involved in the decision. James's response, quote, "This was my decision. I don't do anything in a silo. I run things up the ladder, but this was my decision." At no point does he say, yes, it was me and Pat Kraft deciding we should do this. To me, Justin, and you tell me what you think, that is James going to Pat Kraft and letting him know, hey, I'm thinking about firing Mike Yurcich, and Pat Kraft coming back and being like, if you think that's what's best.
Yes, I think when they're just looking forward to the new age of the Big Ten media rights coming into, that's right up
Huge
Pat
deal.
Kraft's alley, right? And when we talk about what the product is from Penn State football, offensive football is what drives the game of football. And so, like, did he have a conversation or a powwow? But I think, being at the game, Pat is on the sidelines the whole time. It was a little different when Sandy was there. She's there on the sidelines at the beginning to see the coaches, and then she goes upstairs to the press box to deal with the donors and the fundraising. Not necessarily Pat Kraft. When you're at the game, when he's the athletic director, he's on the field from first quarter to fourth quarter in the coaches box, hearing the same things that the coaches are hearing, taking in the atmosphere of the program. So it's not that I think he didn't check with him. I just think he's probably a little bit more aligned and like, you see what I'm seeing? I see what
He
you're
checked
seeing.
with him, but it's a
No,
very
no, no.
different conversation. You know what I'm saying?
No, it's 100% a different conversation. But I think it's one of those things of like, you hear the booze, I hear the booze. We got to make a decision moving forward. And if this is our problem, like, everyone had the expectations. Administration had the expectations. The coaches had the expectations. The team had the expectations. We could say 1-0 every week, but we always had those 2 games circled on our thing. It was like, is this going to be 1-0 against Michigan and Ohio State? And for that not to happen and it to be glaringly clear on whether it's a lack of game plan, creativity, just offensive execution of it being the offensive coordinator, I think it is James's decision, but at the same time, I think that it weighed heavily on the athletic director and the space that we're going into the Big Ten realignment next year and put it on a freaking good offensive product on the field. Because I really believe if we if we went 11-2 and score 50 points a game, or if we lost a shootout against Ohio State and Michigan, where it was 40-43, I think the narrative is completely different and it's moving along. But the fact that we just the clunky and inconsistent offense is not good for anybody. It's not good for donors. It's not good for TV ratings. You have national news media outlets like Dan Le Batard saying, get Penn State and Michigan off of my television. It's not because of the defense. It's a top tier defense.
It's really
you know
tough
what I mean?
Watch.
Offense is tough to watch. So when I think about all those different things and the impact that offense it has, I think Pat had a little bit to do with it. But James also knows at this juncture of his time at Penn State, he has to be clear about where the program is going and making sure that they have the right opportunity. Because I think Pat might have lost a little trust in him if he doesn't make a move and moving forward. And it's like staying copacetic. Because now it's like, all right, well, you're taking the onus on this train moving forward. Not that he doesn't already, but when we're identifying that, the offense is the problem.
And listen, you talk about the alignment all the time, and this is the right chain of command. It makes sense to me the way that that was phrased there by James Franklin, but it's not Pat coming down on James saying, hey, you got to fire this guy, or the two of them huddling up. Yeah, we agree. We have to fire him. That's James going to Pat saying, I think I'm going to fire this guy. And then Pat, this is the beginning of, this is the extension of the leash. You know what I'm saying? Like, this
100%.
is like, hey, this is your decision, you know, and if you think this is what's best, we're going to support you. So again, first year AD, first year president, that makes sense to me, but I still think there's some stuff to be gleaned there. Here's another quote in regard to the new co-offensive coordinators. We talked about running backs coach Juwan Sider and tight ends coach Ty Howell will be the co-offensive coordinators for the remainder of the season. James Franklin on Monday saying, quote, Sider and Howell will be handling the game plan as well as the offensive staff. I think we're a little bit more collaborative right now than we've been recently. My presence is similar to what it's been in the past over my 13 years as a head coach. In terms of play calling, we're going to work that out this week in game planning, and they'll both have a role in play calling. Howell will be upstairs, Sider will be on the sideline. Specifically, that sentence, quote, my presence is similar to what it's been in the past over my 13 years as a head coach. To me, that says nothing's changing. Same old, same old.
Yes. Or it can be taking ownership of the bad product that's been on offense, because there can be a way of standing around of like, I'm going to change something and get involved in the offense. But for him to say his same involvement in the offense, I think validates what we said on the Saturday episode of the inconsistency or just the changing of the offensive coordinator. If there's still glimpses or gaps that need to be filled, then it still starts from the top of the chain, which is him. So I think that validates that point. But with that being said, I mean, I think head coaches are involved in the offensive planning. I think it gets tricky when you have two first-time offensive coordinators game planning, calling the plays, when essentially me being just in the business, I mean, they're interviewing for their offensive coordinator positions.
Sure.
So just sometimes a lot of chefs in the kitchen makes me a little nervous, especially where we're starting from with the misalignment of the offense or just inconsistent play. So when I hear three minds or two offensive coordinators and the same oversight of the head coach, it's just a lot of offensive minds in the pot. And if anybody knows, I mean, sometimes an offense can get a real heady and strategic with the X's and O's because you're drawing up stuff, schematics. And that's why when we spoke on Saturday about giving Mike Yurcich all the credit and blame about the play calling and this, that, and the third, like I've been on teams where we've done a lot of things basic. I've been the player where we've done things basic, and basic things work when you have players. But it's about that game theory. It's like, yo, do you have the confidence to run basic plays because your players are better and continue to stick with it until it works? That's a whole different discussion. So, I mean, who's calling the plays? I don't know. It's more about the charisma and the confidence that you call the plays and chart your attack on Saturday. So that's the thing that needs to be continue to be cleared up, and just hopefully they have a unified game plan coming out of there.
My takeaway again is the offensive style that we have seen from James Franklin's teams dating back to Vanderbilt and through his time at Penn State, the offense that people have been frustrated with, that's not going anywhere from what I understand. Like from what I'm hearing based on those quotes, it's not going to drastically change. I don't think anybody was expecting that in terms of a home game against Rutgers and a road game against Michigan State. Maybe by the bowl game, there's some different things. And then during the Monday press conference, James was also talking about, okay, when do you expect the new full-time offensive coordinator to be brought in? And there is that hope of trying to get the guy before the bowl game, trying to do what was done a few years ago with Manny Diaz, where Manny Diaz was on the sidelines for the bowl game, was able to see what the team looked like, offer some input, kind of get a feel for things, and come up with some ideas rolling into the season. So that timing makes sense. And it's difficult to look for an offensive coordinator and assistant of any kind while the season is underway. So it sounds like the hope is maybe to get that guy before the bowl game, but we'll have to see how that plays out. So my fear is that the offense that people are frustrated with ain't going anywhere, and you might see it again in 2024.
But I think for him to say I think there's a level of him saying that he's going to still be involved with the offense the same amount he has been in the 13 years is kind of selling something low for like a higher output. Just from the
Does do
standpoint
that.
of him, just for the fact of like James is extremely smart, so just people know. Like
Of course.
he,
No,
like
I'm
I mean, like
not
no,
doubting
not
that.
that.
Yeah, of course.
No, I'm not saying anyone's doubting it. I'm saying for him to say that, it's almost like, okay, I'll take the onus of everything going on in here, but we're going to make some changes because they changed the offensive coordinator. And if we look back at the history of the time that they've had success in his tenure at Penn State, not necessarily Vanderbilt, I don't bring that up here, but it's Joe Moorhead. And I think Ricky Ronnie had a nice stint in play calling and the rhythm and how he called the game. But I mean, I think there will be changes in how they approach the offense because he'll make adjustments, but I think that's just him owning the offensive troubles are on his shoulders. So I mean, the spotlight's on.
And I respect owning that, and I do understand him having to be hands-on under such a uh, uncommon situation. I guess it's not uncommon within college football, but still, this is a bit of a shock to the system. You talked about a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Let's throw another name into the hat on offense, Danny O'Brien, who has been involved with quarterbacks as an assistant. The quote from James Franklin on Monday, Danny O'Brien's been very involved. I'm going to make sure I'm in every one of the QB meetings with Danny. In terms of the quarterbacks, Danny and myself will be overseeing the quarterbacks. So that went from being Mike Yurcich handling the quarterbacks. Now Danny O'Brien, who used to be a quarterback at the University of Maryland, has gotten very good reviews, it sounds like, in terms of his relationship with Drew Aller and the rest of the quarterbacks. But now again, that added layer of micromanagement, you have James Franklin, who does have experience in terms of coaching quarterbacks, wide receiver, offensive coordinator, once upon a time. Now hands-on in that room. How do you feel about that?
I like Danny, to be completely honest. Just being around him and going up to the building, he has that charisma of an offensive coach. He's a former player. He understands the whole aspect and the tactician from player to coach. From my perspective, those guys tend to work out well. So I look at him as a high rising type of, or has a profile of a high rising type of coach in the system. And someone like a Drew Aller to be able to connect with him. I mean, it's different when you change coaches due to someone getting fired, right? So like being able to have a player that's probably been through that, understands the business, and still has like tactical coaching acumen to be able to step in here. It's an opportunity for him. I mean, he was the quarterback analyst, or I want to say, was he GA? I want to mess up his title. Whatever the title was, this is an opportunity for him to really showcase his quarterback skills in front of the head coach. So like, I don't actually feel anything about that because he was heavily involved in, I won't say the development of Drew, but like working with Mike along the preseason path. So I'm excited to see him as the quarterback coach, to be honest.
Currently listed as the offensive graduate assistant. And basically when Yurcich was up in the booth, Danny O'Brien was the physical representation of the offensive coordinator on the sidelines, talking directly to Drew, et cetera. So it sounds like that is probably going to continue. So I'm interested to see that. But again, you now have Franklin in the quarterback room. You have Franklin in the co-offensive coordinator room. There's just more cooks in the kitchen, as you talked about. And fortunately, 2 games remaining against inferior opponents.
Hey, when there's issues with the dishes, the chef has to come in and make sure the sous chefs are cooking it up right because something's not right. Because I think these next 3 weeks, going to really try to figure out, okay, what's going on. And I mean, he probably was involved until this point, but you bring in a Mike Yurcich, he was a highly touted offensive coordinator coming into the offseason. So there is a level of like, all right, let him do his thing, or not even beg your pardon, but like submit to his preferences on play calls and different things of that nature. So I mean, when something's broke, it's the head coach's job to figure out how to fix it. So I think him meddling and being in there is a definite necessity at this point of the season.
All right. One more quote here that I think is very interesting. I think you, especially dealing in the world of NIL, the transfer portal, recruiting, talking to players, talking to families. This is something that is, I think, kind of new. The question was asked, will Drew Aller be involved in the hiring process of a new offensive coordinator? Now, you immediately smirk at that. But admittedly, I don't think anybody's ever had that thought in college football, and only in the National
They should
Football League.
never have it, but go ahead.
I understand what you're saying, but like there's plenty of examples in major professional sports where you do see significant players, star players, special players have influence on whether it's a head coach in the NBA or a coordinator in the NFL. Look at the way that Aaron Rodgers has been able to dictate things, right? I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm saying
No, I think they should get saved, but I'm gonna tell you why. It's different.
but it's interesting that that question was posed, and the answer I didn't have a problem with in terms of, James basically said, Aller will not be involved in the hiring process. Now, are they a part of that decision? Yes. In terms of, do they, the future offensive coordinator, fit with our personnel? Does everyone understand what they're signing off on? And like this decision, I want our quarterbacks to be the first to know. So it's like, yeah, they're being considered, but no one is knocking on Drew Aller's dorm room and being like, which offensive coordinator should we go sign? But that is a unique proposition, Justin, that all of a sudden, with the NIL era and the transfer portal, I would not be shocked that if at some point in time, not at Penn State, but some other school, there's going to be a kid that comes along. Hell, if Caleb Williams was a freshman right now, would he call his shot and be like, I want to work with this guy?
So I think there's different leverage points when you can do that. I do not think at any point do you ask a player from a head coaching standpoint, who should we hire onto my staff? Actually, when I was getting recruited, I met with Tim Curley and Graham Spanier, the AD and the president at the time, and Joe was on the hot seat. And the AD and the president on my recruiting visit asked me who would I feel comfortable taking over as the head coach if Joe were to leave during my time there. And so, like, in that situation, I said Tom Bradley, because like I'm getting recruited. This is who I feel comfortable with. This is why I would be essentially attending a university. So even in that conversation, it was a overall leadership part, right? James is the leader. So like Joe Paterno didn't ask me that of like who I want to be my defensive coordinator. So from a head coach asking a player, it's different than the NFL, because NFL or even the NBA, because you're talking about franchise players.
Yes.
I hate to say it, like college guys, I love you guys, I'm a pro player and all that, but none of them are franchise guys. At the most, they're 36-month superstars, which means like the best ones in general are going to be there for 36 months. And when that happens, you can't build a whole infrastructure around that player. But what James said, which I think goes down into just the identity of the team, from him as the head coach, offensive coordinator, down to the personnel, down to the play callers, all the way through, is having that consistent personnel that matches up with that coach. There's a thing that says like being the head coach of your positions, or just the coaches are able to recruit and bring in the talent in their room. So sometimes there's, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So like you have different coaches that are continually to transition on offense. They start bringing in the guys that they like. So I would like to see, with that being said, that there's just continuous or a standard on the offense, regardless of who the coach is, that it matches up with the product or the offensive identity that we're rolling with. Because I think that's something that needs to be looked at on the offense, is that there's been so many different people recruiting offensive players, whether it's the string of receivers coaches or the different offensive coordinators, and the positions that have done well have some stability, right? Like the running backs. I mean, J1's been there since Miles, and he's done a good job on recruiting, so forth and so on. So with that being said, yeah, I think it comes from the head coach when you're talking about setting the personnel and everything, and then the coaches align with that. For example, like Alabama, they always have new coaches, but the personnel and everything and systems look the same, or whatever's coming down. So I think from that standpoint, yeah, it has to flow from James, and never should a day in college where a player should call the shots just based on the time that they spend in the school.
And now listen, just because the player is not consulted doesn't mean the player won't decide to transfer. And again, I just referenced Caleb Williams. He played with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, and then Lincoln Riley went to USC, and he was like, man, I like his system. I like playing for him. Transferred to USC, and he won a Heisman Trophy. So there's that.
And I think that's completely different, right? Because now that's what I was saying about
it's
the scrap
not far
situation.
off from that point, though.
Now we're here. Well, it is because like I don't think Yurcich is going to be a hot name on the block. Like
Agreed.
it's not. I don't think. I mean, you're talking like Caleb
No,
Williams
he has
had
to
Lincoln
rebuild his
Riley,
name a bit. Yep.
but he had. So if as from a quarterback, so if I'm talking to a high school quarterback right now, I'm telling them to more so align with a quarterback coach in a offensive philosophy than I am with necessarily a university, as I would do with all the other positions. So I think that is different with quarterbacks because I think the personal relationship between the quarterback, coach, and offensive coordinator, hope most of the times they're the same person. You want that coach to have, I mean, a biased opinion towards you in the positive, right? So even when like
Mhm.
Jomo, when
Sure.
he went to Mississippi State, our highest, guess who our highest recruited quarterback on the board was at the time? Garrett Schrader. Guess who became Mississippi State's top quarterback? Garrett Schrader. So like it's all that even internally just to cause some stir and have some stuff going. Like I remember Kenny Sanders, shout out to the Kennel in there, but like we were bringing up the possibility of like, yo, if Jomo's up, he's a hot coach. Is there a reason we're not recruiting Justin Fields as hard as we need to because he knows he's not going to come here? Like, so you start seeing like that the way that quarterback coach, even talent acquisition funnel is completely different. So I'm saying that to say is like, yeah, Drew has to have some gonads to be like, all right, I'm leaving if I don't have the right coach for me. But it's up to James to make sure he finds the right person that fits with the talent that he already has. So it's just a little further down in the timeline. But there are areas where a player can hold them hostage, and I'm all for that when it happens.
And just like Mike Yurcich is about to have to, rebuild his image and rebuild what his reputation is, Drew Aller is going to be doing the same. Let's be very realistic in that through 10 starts, yeah, 8-2, but those 2 losses were rough. There were some road starts that were rough. There's bright spots and there's been some rough spots. It's been inconsistent. So, yes, he is a 5-star recruit and all the physical gifts appear to be there. So, like we've said, I'm sure most major Power 5 schools, Group of 5 schools would want to talk to him. But he is not exactly the hottest commodity right now. And it's no disrespect to what his game is. It's just a matter of what's occurred over the last month, especially.
And for him, I mean, be real. Like, there's a level of even when you're in the NFL, when you're jumping into free agency, not taking that deal that the team offers, like you're betting on yourself. Like you have to feel
Yes.
good about yourself. You have to feel confident. I just don't know how confident he is. So like right now, I feel like Penn State and James have the leverage when it comes down to, hey, this is the move we're going to make. We're going to take in your talents. We're not trying to bench you. We're not trying to move on for you or anything like that. But someone that's still fond of, I mean, he's still our guy at this moment. But just
Absolutely.
know that Bo is still producing. Gunk is coming in next year. Like the pipeline from what's my man's name with the quarterback coach, like Brad, that pipeline's still coming in. So like he has to work and continue to get better. But
Mhm.
I'm digressing off the question of should he have any input of an offensive coordinator coming in. I think coming into the situation when a player has leverage or can pick their situation, that's when they exercise all the say of like, hey, I want this coach. Like if he was a recruit coming in, like in about the sign of December, yeah, you got to talk to me about what's going to happen. But now
Mhm.
that he's in there, just the art of war, you got to sit tight.
One more question, and I promise we will get to talking a little bit about Penn State versus Rutgers. If you were to build an offensive game plan around Drew Aller, what would it look like?
Offensive game plan. Well, game plan would have to be indicative of the defense that I'm playing against. But if I was going to build an offensive philosophy,
Philosophy,
oh
yes, better
yeah,
word.
philosophy. Yeah, there we go. No, that's cool. I mean, a philosophy around them. I mean, I would be going with like a Bruce Arians type of offense. I mean, I would make sure that his risk tolerance is raised up a little bit, and we're going to be risking. It's going to be risking it. Like I've been saying, with stretching the field, vertical attack. And with that situation, like the fact that he's been able to show like the athletic ability and playmaking ability when things break down, and those are the type of situations that you want to see. So if I was going to build a philosophy, it would be like around a coach like a Bruce Arians and like how he kind of throws it out there. But remember, he throws a lot of interceptions. People got on Jameis Winston his rookie year when he had those 30 touchdowns or 40 touchdowns and 30 interceptions. No risk it, no biscuit. But that's a part of it. And I think Drew can be a volume passer as he gets in rhythm and all that good stuff. But you can't do that without dynamic receivers and playmakers around him. So
Definitely an issue. Personnel, the kennel, like you talked about, works their butts off and is trying to get as many talented people in the building. And at least, you have the aces there, the tight ends you feel good about, the lawn boys you feel good about, but wide receivers certainly need some love. For me, looking at Drew Aller's game and then also not ignoring Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and all this is that, for Drew, the ability to get the ball out in 1 to 2 seconds, very much NFL style, the way that you just talked about Bruce Arians. I think about Tom Brady's whole run with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not the most mobile time in his career. That ball was out quick. And granted, he had a lot of really talented receivers, and it's completely apples to oranges talking about the NFL to the college game, but still taking advantage of mismatches where you have them in regard to the tight end. You got to get some more talent at wide receiver. But if you can get the ball out quickly, Drew's not meant to be carrying the ball 10 times a game like he did against Michigan. He can get the ball out and he can put it in a lot of different places, but you got to stretch the field. You have to work the seams in between the hashes. You've got to exploit zone coverages. And then when it comes to running the football, part of this is Nick Singleton's individual work on his own, but then also finding a way to set him up for success. You hit it really well early on in the season, is that Nick needs 4 to 5 yards to get going. Give me him in a pistol formation. Give me the quarterback under center. Give me I-backs. I know a fullback would be kind of insane to think about once again here at Penn State, but we used to do that quite a bit. I wouldn't hate seeing that again. Katron can dance and get his things in between the tackles and doesn't really need that much space to get going. But Nick's a different type of guy, and it's almost thinking back to when Joe Moorhead was here, and you and I have talked about this off air, is that Saquon would get a lot of tosses and counters to the outside off tackle. Wasn't doing a ton in between the tackles. Not that he wasn't capable of it. That wasn't the way the offense was tailored. It feels like Nick could be set up in a similar fashion. So I think the philosophy that you and I are just kind of discussing right now is a departure from the offense that has been instilled and has been executed by now 5 different offensive coordinators under James Franklin. And it's like, okay, that difference, those changes could work, but will they find the right guy that is going to implement that system? And will they find a guy who is willing to stand up for that system and a guy that James Franklin is going to let do all those things individually? As James said
100%.
on Monday, it's a people business.
100%. You can have 4 verticals in your playbook, but if you don't have the gonads to call it on game day, it doesn't really matter.
Even though the fall can feel jam-packed, HelloFresh makes whipping up a home-cooked dinner actually doable with quick and easy options, including their 15-minute meals. That's less time than it takes to get delivery. And with everything pre-portioned and delivered right to your door every week, it really is a no-brainer. Some of my personal favorites, the pub-style shepherd's pie is delicious, and the fully loaded pork taquitos, 2 of my favorite dishes. And Justin, on top of that, they're healthy, they're fresh, and they save me time and money.
Talk about convenience, something that tastes good and saving money. I mean, it's essential in my life where I'm just running around, whether it's podcast, talent management, dealing with my daughter in tennis and moving around, and having a healthy, convenient meal that saves money on the grocery bill and just the food budget is amazing. It's a +1 in my book.
You hit the nail on the head. We all know HelloFresh takes the hassle out of mealtime, but did you know it can also save you money? HelloFresh is 25% less expensive than takeout. So that means you can get an easy home-cooked meal on the table and more money back in your pocket. So head to HelloFresh.com/50Lion and use code 50Lion, that's 50Lion, for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, that's HelloFresh.com/50Lion and use the code 50Lion, 50Lion, for 50% off plus free shipping. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. As promised, now it's time to talk about Rutgers. And I really don't mean this as disrespect to Rutgers, because I don't necessarily think, given what we saw last weekend and what I can only imagine is the vibe around the team inside the building, this is definitely a game that they are going to be emotionally challenged with, coming off of such a letdown against Michigan. And I don't want to necessarily call it a trap game, because it's not like you have some Titan on the other side in Michigan State. Michigan State has really struggled mightily this season. But Rutgers is a different story. They come in at 6-4, as I mentioned. They have back-to-back losses now. Iowa 22-0 this past weekend, which Iowa's somehow 8-2. I don't understand how that freaking happened. But the week before, at home against Ohio State, Rutgers gave Ohio State everything they could handle for basically 3 quarters. And then Ohio State discovered that they could throw the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. They leaned on him in the fourth quarter. And tell me if you've heard that story before. Ohio State did that to Penn State. They did it to Maryland. They did it to Rutgers. But still, credit to Rutgers. Greg Schiano and that defense came prepared, gave Kyle McCord and company problems. Before that, defeated Indiana 31-14, defeated Michigan State, the aforementioned Michigan State, a little bit closer than many would expect, 27-24. And before that, a loss on the road at Wisconsin, 24-13. So it's an up and down team. Gavin Wimsatt at quarterback. We've seen a little bit of him at this point, Justin. Dual threat quarterback, not terribly accurate, but he can create those mismatch problems. Running back Kyle Monungai is very, very solid, and it's much more of whenever you get to see Michigan actually throw the ball, not like they did in the second half against us, unfortunately, the offense in the manner that they utilize J.J. McCarthy as a weapon, as a mesh point, making the defensive end or a linebacker or a spy think about him. Rutgers can do some similar things. When you watch the Scarlet Knights offensively, let's start there. What should Penn State be prepared for most?
I mean, the trick plays. I mean, to be honest, playing a team again like Rutgers and Greg Schiano, they're going to come out, they're going to be physical, they're going to take their shots, right? Like, I think really being on key, reading your keys throughout the time. I mean, look for the play action. I mean, we just shown that a team ran the ball 50 times in the second half, so we got to make sure we stop the run because, again, I think Schiano's the type of coach where he's going to test the physicality. That's the one thing about Rutgers. I don't say they make me nervous, but it's going to be a physical game, and they're not going to back down. So it's going to be one of these games where execution is going to be at a premium for our offense based on the troubles that we've had. Because I think Rutgers is going to come out ready to try to punch us in the mouth, to be completely honest. And just, Schiano has some Penn State ties, and so he believes in that Penn State toughness. So I can hear him preaching that to their team and coming in there and saying that, hey, these guys never wanted you guys, so let's give it to them. I mean, everything's just different now, man, with the transfer portal and the way different coaches are. But this Rutgers game, man, guys got to come in ready to go after it. Even though it's senior day, this is the game that you don't want the last loss to turn into 2 losses, because I think more so than the last game after Ohio State, what was that? Who did we play after that?
Maryland.
We were like Maryland. It was like a trap game or something. No, it wasn't Maryland.
I'm sorry, Indiana. Yeah, forgive me.
Indiana.
Yes.
We were like, yeah, it can't be a trap game. Rutgers can be a trap
was.
game. Nearly was, but Rutgers can actually be like Rutgers is a lot tougher than Indiana. So you got to come on ready to play.
Kyle Monungai, 942 yards rushing on the season, 5.2 yards per carry, 7 touchdowns. Gets involved sparingly in the passing game. Johnny Langan at tight end, who has been there for going on 17 years, used to play quarterback, has played tight end, has played wide receiver in the past. So he's a versatile gadget type player. You talked about some of those trick plays, so that's something Penn State's going to have to be aware of. But of either side of the ball that I am worried about, I am not terribly worried about what Penn State does defensively. I expect them to have a strong bounce back game. It's offensively, naturally, that everybody is worried about for this game. For Rutgers, I believe they are 13th in the country in total defense. They allow about 294.5 yards per game altogether, passing 166 yards per game, rushing 128 yards per game, and they're giving up 18.3 points per game. What is it that Greg Schiano can put out there against Penn State this weekend that makes you worried? Because it seems like the formula that you talked about in the offseason has been utilized well by the teams that have given Penn State problems.
I think he's going to continue to go about that, where it's just a nice odd front or even front and playing pressure behind them. I'm talking about the defense attacking Penn State, right?
Yes. Rutgers defense against Penn State's offense.
Rutgers defense. Yeah, I think they're going to pretty much play on man up, to be completely honest, across the board and force them to throw the football. I think Schiano, just the way he's coached and his history, has been an aggressive type of style. And I think the team's going to come in playing fearless. So with that being said, I remember times in the past where they didn't have nearly the amount of talent that they have now, and they still played in a little bit more aggressive fashion where it's just like, hey, we're going to lose our way. So with that being said, I think they're going to come out with the same game plan that we've seen against Ohio State, Michigan, and teams like that, where they're going to challenge the outside receivers and make us beat them. And so it's up to our guys to really go into these last games. I hate to say it, but not so much as a team first approach. Like everyone needs to take a look in the mirror and not have so much of a team first approach, but like, yo, what am I doing? Like, am I beating my man? Like, am I making the play? Like, not looking up to like the next person, or I need this person to do this, or the play calls that. Like, am I going to make this play when it comes? Like, when someone throws me the ball, am I going to make a interception? Am I going to force a turnover? Am I going, like, all those different type of things? That identity needs to be spread across, I think, the offensive side of the football. And I think if they take that onus and put it on their shoulders, I think we'll start seeing some different outcomes, because I mean, players embody how they're coached. To be complete, like, that's just the facts of it.
In your time in college, can you recall a similar circumstance, big game and a painful loss going into a game against a lesser opponent, and whether it was at home or not, but just kind of that letdown, and then almost that question in the back of your head of, well, what do we have to play for, and is this a meaningless game, quote unquote?
Yeah, I mean, I think my junior year, we played Michigan State at the end of the year, and they end up coming back and we let it slip away. But it was just a team that we should have beat. And it was really, I don't say going through the motions, but it was just really like that edge was off at the end of the season. And it was, and losing to a team that you're better than always hurts. And it was just like poor mistakes, like bad fundamentals is like hurtful for me in football. So we weren't tackling well, just doing the simple things well. In the 10th back then, the 10th or 11th game of the season, that just, you have to clean up. So you have to play with that level of intensity to finish out the season. That's what made me say guys going into it with a not a me first mentality, but like a me first, I'm gonna win my matchup mentality. Like, this is on me. Stop looking around. Oh, head coach fire. Who's going to replace this? Am I going to get my care? You beat the man across you. Beat that. Like, focus on that, and just whatever it is called. If it's a block, beat that person. If it's a slant, beat that person. If it's a run block, beat that person. Like, everyone on offense should just think of that. The offensive coordinators, if this is their play call, be aggressive, and this is what we're going to do. And let's see where the chips fall.
What's the old adage? Tape don't lie. What are you going to put on tape? What are you going to put on tape for, to be in the next series, to be in the next game, to be on the team next season, to be on another team next season, to be
think about jumping in the transfer portal, like all those different things.
It's not like Dion now. It's like, go ahead.
I'm just saying, think about it. You have to put in good film, right? It's just because that's a new dynamic for players in college football, where a lot of times you get upset with a coach and it's just like you just complain about the infrastructure, where it's like, hey, guys are watching. Like, I mean, like you said about Drew, can he leave? It's like, can he? I think it goes two ways.
I know this has been a rough episode, and it's like it was a rough weekend. Let's not kid ourselves. But all kidding aside, Penn State should win this game against Rutgers. I think they will have their challenges against this Rutgers defense, and you will see if Rutgers sticks to the rushing attack. Kyle Monangai can cause some problems. So if Rutgers follows a similar formula to what Michigan did last week, and to a degree what Ohio State did weeks ago, then yes, they have a chance to be successful. But I would be truly surprised to see Penn State lose this game at home against Rutgers. And another thing to play for, it is senior day, and this is a very tradition-rich program. These are guys that care about this program, guys that care about putting on the blue and white for the last time. So hopefully there are enough motivations, enough reasons for them to play their best this coming weekend, which I fully expect. Penn State versus Rutgers will be this Saturday at noon Eastern on FS1. We will have your full recap episode right here on State of State.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, let us know what you think of the show on Twitter @TheKing1 and @TomHannafin. State of State is presented by BetOnline.